The HOA thought they could break me by shutting off my water, but they never bothered to learn the one thing that could destroy them. I own the well that keeps their entire neighborhood alive, so when they cut off my water, I turned off theirs. They didn't send a warning. No notice, no conversation. The HOA just marched onto my property and shut off my water like they owned the place. They thought I'd panic. They thought they'd finally force me to pay their fake violation fees. But there was one problem with their master plan. They forgot who actually owns the land beneath this neighborhood, who owns the pipes, who owns the system, who owns the well that every single home drinks from, including the HOA president who shut mine off. So when she came to my porch, smirking, telling me this was just the beginning, I didn't argue, I didn't yell. I walked to the main valve and turned it. Within seconds, sprinklers died mid-spray. Fountains choked, taps ran dry, the entire neighborhood froze, and that's when the HOA finally realized. They tried to starve the one man who controls the water. They say every neighborhood has a story. Mine began with water, not the peaceful kind that trickles through a quiet backyard or runs from a kitchen tap without a second thought. No, my story started with the kind of water that makes people desperate, entitled, and bold enough to wage a quiet war. The HOA called it community property, but legally, historically, and practically, it was mine, the well, not a small pump, not a shared pipe. A deep, cold, ancient well drilled decades before the HOA even existed, a well that ran beneath my land, fed by the underground channels my grandfather mapped long before any house in the neighborhood was built. And yet, they tried to weaponize water against me. The first sign came quietly. A letter taped to my door. Violation notice. Overgrown shrubs. $200 fine. Shrubs. I didn't even have shrubs in the front yard, only gravel, stone, and drought-resistant plants. But I ignored it, thinking it was just some clerical mistake. Then came another, and another. Trash can left out too long. Holiday lights not approved. Garage door left open for more than 3 minutes. A non-existent shed blocking community view corridor. It felt random at first, then intentional. Like someone had circled my house on a map and whispered, make his life miserable. Still, I kept calm. HOA love drama, and giving them silence frustrates them more than any argument, but then came the day everything changed. I woke up, turned the faucet, and nothing, not a drip, not a struggle of pipes, just silence. In a home where water never fails because I control the well, silence is the loudest sound you can hear. At first, I thought it was a mechanical issue, maybe a pump failure, maybe a pressure valve jammed. But then I stepped outside and saw them. 3 HOA board members standing in front of my property like self-appointed sheriffs. One of them, a tall woman with oversized sunglasses and a thick binder clutched to her chest, looked almost smug. She said the words like a line she had practiced in the mirror. We have temporarily suspended your water access due to unpaid violation fees. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how absurd the entire situation was. My water access? I asked calmly, you mean the well that sits on my land, that I own, that you all drink from? Her smile faltered, but she pushed through her script. The HOA has authority over all community resources. That's not a community resource, I said. That's a private water source you don't have the rights to even touch. But they didn't back down. In fact, that smug woman lifted her chin like she had just won something. Until your fines are paid, she repeated, you will remain without water. They walked away, just like that, as if they had punished a misbehaving child. I stood in my driveway, watching them leave, a strange mix of anger and amusement building in my chest. They thought they controlled me. They really had no idea. For the next 2 days, they celebrated subtly but noticeably. HOA members strolling through the neighborhood with an air of victory. People whispering as I passed, like I had been put in my place. Meanwhile, everything around me ran smoothly. Because the HOA never actually cut off my water, they had simply locked the external valve, the one connected to their outdated meters, the one they thought controlled my house. My actual supply bypassed their system entirely. The irony, they didn't even know, but I stayed silent. I didn't correct them, I didn't argue. I let them believe they had won because I was waiting, and the moment came faster than expected. 3 days later, a hot afternoon when lawns were dying, Fountains were running non-stop, and sprinklers buzzed across perfectly manicured HOA. Approved grass. Something happened. It was subtle at first. A couple walking their dog whispered, "Why is the fountain slowing down?" Another neighbor frowned at his lawn, touching the dry patches. "My sprinklers aren't spraying fully." Then at 6:12 p.m., the first real sign, the neighborhood's centerpiece fount, in the one the HOA bragged about in every pamphlet, sputtered like an old engine and died, not a trickle. Not a drip, just dry stone. People gathered around, confused. Residents held up phones, recording, complaining. And right in the middle of the commotion, the same HOA woman marched toward my property, anger radiating off her like heat waves. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. She stormed into my front yard and shouted, "Did you do something to the water system?" I stepped out onto my porch slowly, calmly, with a cup of coffee in hand. "Do something." I repeated, "No." I simply adjusted the valve that controls the well. Her face drained of color. "You turned off the entire neighborhood's water supply." I shrugged. "You turned off mine first." "That's illegal." She barked. "Is it?" I asked because from where I'm standing, all I see is an HOA tampering with a private-owned water source. I'm just protecting my asset. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Behind her, residents began gathering, watching, whispering. Suddenly the narrative shifted. I wasn't the villain anymore. They were. The HOA had overplayed its hand, and for the first time, the neighborhood saw it. Someone from the crowd shouted, "Wait, the well is his, not HOA property." Another voice, "Did they cut his water? Why?" And then a third, "This is going to the county." The HOA woman panicked. "You need to restore water immediately." She demanded. "I will," I said, "as soon as the county settles the complaint I filed this morning regarding harassment, illegal shutoff, and attempted control of private utilities." Her jaw dropped. You filed a complaint." I nodded. "And I have documentation, pictures, video, letters." Everything. The crowd erupted not in chaos, but in a chilling realization. The HOA had gone too far, and they were about to pay for it. That was the moment the board members realized something else. They never should have messed with the man who owned the one thing they couldn't live without. The water, because if they wanted a war, I wasn't just ready. I controlled the source. The HOA wasn't just angry, they were humiliated. Turning off my water was supposed to be their final warning. Their show of dominance, their way of proving that no one in the neighborhood was untouchable. But when their fountains dried out, when the board members couldn't shower, when residents started calling and screaming at them, they didn't blame themselves, they blamed me, and that's when things turned from petty to dangerous. The meeting they never invited me to that evening, while I was cleaning out the old well house, I saw 5 HOA board members gathering across the street, whispering, pacing, throwing frustrated gestures into the air. They didn't know that sound carries farther across open farmland than it does in their cul-de-sac kingdom. Their voices came across the wind. "Perfectly, he embarrassed us. The community is furious. He thinks he can shut off the whole neighborhood. We need leverage, something he can't fight back against. And then, let's file a claim. Say the well is unsafe. If we get the county involved first, he'll look like the villain." My blood went cold. This wasn't about rules anymore. This wasn't about water. They wanted to weaponize the law itself. A manufactured health violation. A fraudulent safety complaint. A government intervention meant to shut me down. Not them. They wanted to twist the same system that protects homeowners into a weapon to crush one, but they made a fatal mistake. I wasn't just a property owner. I wasn't just the guy with the well. I was the guy who kept every document, permit, inspection report, and water test. Since the day I bought the land and the county knew me, I'd donated to community clean water programs for years. I'd hosted tours for agricultural students. I'd helped restore abandoned wells before the HOA even existed. If the HOA wanted a war with the county, I was more prepared than they realized. The county arrives expecting a criminal. 3 days later, it happened. I heard the gravel crunch long before I saw the vehicles turning into my drive. A county truck, a sheriff's SUV, and behind them 2 HOA board members, standing tall like they had just caught a fugitive. Their president, Linda, the same woman who bragged about shutting off my water, stood with her arms crossed, lips curled into a thin, triumphant smile. "Mr. Hale," The inspector called out, stepping from the truck. We received a complaint regarding your well. Claims of contamination, structural risk, and illegal access. I looked directly at Linda. She didn't blink. She thought she had finally won. She thought she had cornered me, but what she didn't understand was simple. You don't fight a man on his own land. About something he built with his own hands, using paperwork he knows better than you ever will. Inspector, I said calmly, would you like the most recent lab results, the structural report, or the video documentation first? The inspector blinked. Video documentation. Of course, I said. If someone claims contamination, the most responsible thing to do is record the well conditions daily. That part wasn't exactly true. I had started filming only after I overheard the HOA plan, but he didn't need to know that yet. The HOA president shifted nervously. But I wasn't done. Would you also like copies of the maintenance logs? They go back 8 years. Signed by certified technicians, approved by the county, and notarized. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. Linda's confidence melted into confusion. Sir, the inspector said slowly, why would someone file a complaint if everything is this well maintained? Before I could answer, one of the HOA board members blurted, because he's cutting off our water. The inspector turned sharply. Your water comes from his private well. They froze. None of them spoke. The sheriff let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You filed a county health complaint against a man whose private well you all depend on. He asked, do you have any idea how serious filing a false environmental claim is? This time Linda blinked. Hard, the county investigation flips the script. The inspector walked with me to the well house. Clean structure, proper gate, security lock, fresh filtration, flawless water clarity, everything perfect. After 15 minutes of reviewing documents and taking his own samples, he looked at me and said, this well meets every regulation. I'm closing this case, but I'm opening another one. Another one? I asked. He nodded, glancing back at the HOA group. They filed a knowingly false claim. That's fraud and wasting county resources and possibly water theft. Linda's face drained of color. What water theft? She stammered. Ma'am, he said. This well is privately owned. If you shut off his water, that's a civil dispute. But when you take water from him without agreement, that's theft. One of the board members tried to step in. We didn't know. We thought you thought wrong. The sheriff snapped, and after today, the county is taking this very seriously. For the first time since this war began, the HOA didn't look powerful. They looked small, cornered, terrified, and then the sheriff said something I'll never forget. You don't believe the person who controls the source. The HOA's final panic move. The investigation alone should have ended it, but the HOA pride, their arrogance, their refusal to admit defeat, it pushed them into one last reckless mistake. They tried to build their own unauthorized water line. Overnight, no permits, no approval, no engineer, just a group of stubborn board members, a rented trencher, and a fantasy that they could bypass the well they'd been stealing from for years. It took exactly 1 hour for the county to shut them down. It took another hour for fines to be issued. And by sunrise the next morning, the HOA was standing in the community center shouting, panicking, accusing each other as residents demanded answers for dry taps and skyrocketing fees. They came after me. They lied about me. They shut off my water. They stole from my well. And they tried to bury me with fraudulent charges, but in the end, they drowned in their own arrogance. The HOA didn't just break the law. They didn't just lie. They didn't just steal water. They triggered something far bigger, something the county wasn't going to ignore. And when the full investigation officially opened, the HOA finally realized they weren't fighting me anymore. They were fighting the government, and they were losing badly. The county hearing where truth hits like a hammer 2 weeks later, I got the letter, a formal summons, county hall, full review of the HOA actions, with mandatory attendance from all board members. The moment I walked into the hearing room, it felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The HOA board sat at their table looking pale, stiff, and bruised by the chaos they'd created. Residents filled the back rows, whispering angrily. We had no water for days. My kids couldn't shower. They said it was his fault. I want refunds. and sitting beside me was the county inspector, holding a thick folder labeled HOA Violations Emergency Review. The hearing director entered, cleared his throat, and spoke with the calm of a man who'd seen every kind of stupidity imaginable. Let's begin. But he didn't start with me. He started with them. First item. The HOA filed a county-level contamination complaint about a privately owned well. This complaint was proven false. The room buzzed. Linda, the president, shifted nervously. Second item. The HOA knowingly shut off the private water line of a resident without legal grounds. The sheriff added, loud enough to echo, "That's tampering with essential utilities." A serious offense. Residents murmured. The director continued. Third item. The HOA illegally tapped into a private water source without a permit. Classified as unauthorized usage. Now the room erupted. Someone shouted, "They stole our drinking water." Another resident yelled, "We pay dues for this." The director held up a hand. "There's more." Silence fell. He opened another file. Fourth item. The HOA attempted to build an unlicensed waterline trench across multiple properties. No permits, no engineering review, no environmental assessment. Another voice shouted from the back, "They could have hit the sewer line." The director nodded. "They nearly did." Linda finally tried to speak. We didn't know." He cut her off. "Mrs. Patel, you filed a false environmental report. You authorized illegal construction. You shut off a private water source, and you stole water from a resident's personal well." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She was cornered. The director turned to me. "Mr. Hale, you may speak." But I didn't gloat. I didn't shout. I didn't even smile. I simply stood and said the truth. I never wanted a fight. I never wanted to punish anyone. I only wanted to be left alone on my property. They shut off my water without cause. They lied about my well. They stole from it. They threatened me. And they put the entire community at risk. The director nodded slowly. That matches the evidence. He sat back, and then he delivered a verdict that would shake the neighborhood for years. The hammer falls. The HOA board is removed effective immediately. Gasps, shouts, a few cheers. He wasn't done. The HOA is hereby fined $48,000 for damages, wasted county resources, and illegal construction. The board members froze like statues. Furthermore, the director continued, the HOA is required to reimburse Mr. Hale for all unauthorized water usage estimated at 2 years' worth. Linda flinched. Residents whispered with wide eyes, and lastly, the HOA must restore all water access, infrastructure, and fees related to their misconduct at their own expense. That's when the room erupted. Cheers, clapping, a few angry shouts aimed directly at the former HOA board. But it wasn't the money that broke them. It was the final sentence. And the HOA will be placed under temporary county management for corrective oversight. In plain English, they lost everything: power, control, authority, and reputation. The sheriff leaned toward Linda and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "You don't mess with a man's water. You really don't mess with the man who owns yours." I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The fight was over. The aftermath, when the neighborhood changed forever over the next month, everything flipped. Residents no longer avoided me. They thanked me. "You saved the whole neighborhood. We didn't know they were stealing from your well. They blamed everything on you. I'm sorry. You exposed them." A few brought fresh bread, fruit baskets, even handwritten notes. For the first time in years, the neighborhood actually felt human. The county oversaw repairs. New pipes were installed legally, and the HOA new temporary director enforced real rules, not power fantasies. But the biggest change, people finally realized something important. I wasn't the problem. The HOA had been abusing power for years, silencing complaints, hiding violations, and draining money into pet projects. My fight exposed all of it, and while I never wanted to be the center of the storm, sometimes a storm is the only thing that clears the air. The final scene, my turn to close the valve a month after the hearing. I walked back to the well house at sunset. Warm orange sky, calm breeze, the steady sound of clean water flowing. I rested my hand on the main valve, the same one I had turned off when they came after me, but this time, I wasn't turning it off. I was turning it back on permanently, because victory isn't always about shutting people out. Sometimes it's about proving that the truth will outlast every lie thrown at it. The water surged, quiet, powerful, a reminder of the simple truth they had forgotten. You never attack the person who controls the source, because the source always wins. I walked away from the well with a small smile, not out of pride, but closure. The HOA tried to drain me. They tried to break me. They tried to use my own water against me, but in the end, they drowned in their own corruption, and I walked away clean. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more videos. Thank you. This video is a dramatized, AI-generated story created for entertainment purposes only. Names, characters, and situations are fictional and do not represent any real individuals or events. This content fully complies with YouTube's community guidelines and policies.